I don't know about you, but my Sundays are taken up with reading all of the material I didn't get to during the week, going through my inbox and seeing what's of interest and what I can delete. And imagine my surprise when I came across a Bloomberg piece by Walter Frick, The End of the Long Cycle. I'm going to tell you why this is really interesting, because it essentially is all about the Annales School. And this was a French school of history that I guess got started in the late 20s and was influential back even in the 70s and 80s when I was going to university. And it really influenced me because up to then, up to the 20s, it was the great men's school of history. It was about political leaders and it was about battles and it was about political change and so on. And the Annales School, the best way I can illustrate it is a book I read by one of its historians, in which it was a little village in the Pyrenees Mountains in France, and the church, the Catholic Church, had preserved its records like back to the 12th century or something. I mean, it was this treasure trove of archives, of old documents. And what the historian did is he went through those and he recreated the life of, told the story of that village over centuries. That was a completely different way of approaching history. So then along came a fellow named Fernand Braudel, who was kind of the leading light of the Annales School. And one of the innovations that he brought was he divided history into three different types of long-term or types of processes, if you will. The first one is events. And the example of an event would be the election of Donald Trump. Then the next one is paradigm shifts, and these take place over decades. And so, in this case, looking forward, it's very clear that Donald Trump is destroying the rules-based trading order that the United States set up after World War II. He's got unilateral trading deals that he's making with all of various countries and groups like the EU. He is trying to renegotiate trading agreements like he is with Canada, but he wants to do things unilaterally. He wants to do the big deal. It's the art of the deal for him. And he's using energy and he's using defense and foreign policy to bully his, countries like Canada into giving him what he wants. And he's going to destroy all the institutions that have been grown up to support global free trade over the last 80, 85 years. So that would be an example of a paradigm shift. And then there's the long cycle. And in this context, I think the long cycle is from molecules and combusting molecules provided by fossil fuels and to create heat, which then we turn into work. Could be in an internal combustion engine, could be in a turbine, could be in a steam engine, whatever it is. You first combust the fossil fuel, then you make work out of it. It's very inefficient. Internal combustion engines like 20, 25, 30% efficient. The transition is to electric technologies, electrons. And so what we're going to do, we're making electricity not by combusting coal or gas, we're making it with technology, wind and solar, for example, stored with batteries. And that is a long cycle shift. So this process that got started, back in the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century of combusting fossil fuels and combusting molecules is coming to an end. And we're now going to be embarking on the electric age. And it was only 6 months ago or so, Fatih Birol, who's the executive director of the IEA, said publicly, the age of oil is dead. The age of electricity has begun. And this is essentially, it's another frame for what I'm arguing here. And this is really important because I'm going to argue that, in fact, Canada doesn't get it. So if we apply the Annales School, Fernand Braudel's framework to Canada, we have an event. I would argue that election of Prime Minister Mark Carney was a very important event going forward for this country. The guy's got a PhD in economics. He's former governor of two central banks, Canada and Britain, the UK. He was, famous for organizing climate finance at the global level. It's hard to find somebody more qualified than Mark Carney to lead the country at a time when we're going through this shift. And that's the paradigm shift that I was talking about earlier. We're looking for new trading partners. We're looking at internal free trade. We're going to build infrastructure. We're going on and on. So you can see where we got the first one, I would argue, correct. I think Mark Carney's a good choice for prime minister. I would argue that, in fact, the strategy, new trading partners and internal free trade, I have some criticisms of it because we're just doing the same old thing, looking for new customers, which we should not be. We should be adding value to resource risk for another conversation. But where we have missed the boat is we do not recognize in Canada that there is the long cycle of that started in the Industrial Revolution and combusting fossil fuel molecules and transitioning to electric technology. We have not recognized this, and one of the reasons is that Justin Trudeau, starting in the fall of 2015, when he was first elected, his government was the Liberals were first elected under him. Everything was framed in terms of policy, framed in terms of meeting the Paris Agreement, reducing emissions, systematically decarbonizing the economy using carbon pricing and other policy tools. And so in Canada, that influenced the way we talk about the energy transition. We see it primarily in terms of not economic terms, not technology terms, not technology change, but in terms of climate. And that's right now, that might have been great 10 years ago, but it's an impediment now. And I'm going to explain that for you. So the first error that we've made three of them, as you can see from the slide on the screen, made energy transition errors. And the first one is failure to recognize long cycle change and the transition to electric technologies has begun. We're just not there. The second thing is because we're so tied into the old way of doing things, we're dominated by incumbents. And that could be oil companies, it could be LNG companies, it could be auto manufacturing sector, it could be mining, utilities, whatever. We're a small open country, economy, 40 million people. We don't have the big internal market that the Americans have or the Europeans have or China has. And so we tend to have a few big companies, influential companies. They're incumbents. Incumbents do what incumbents always do, which is impede change. They want the status quo. That's what they've learned to live with. That's where they've learned to be profitable, and they don't want to change. And, I've talked in other videos about our energy media's energy transition theory of change, and it's built around the work of Clayton Christensen, a former professor at the Harvard Business School, who said innovative disruptions like electric technologies then disrupt economies, they disrupt industries, they disrupt individual corporate business models. And that's what's happening. And we haven't got there yet. We don't understand, we're misinterpreting what's happening at the global level. Our political and business class have failed us. And that then you can see in our lack of policy innovation. We're being proactive. We're not doing what the Chinese did 15 or 20 years ago, who looked at the automotive industry, for example, and said, we're never going to catch the West. We're not going to catch Europe. We're not going to catch the United States. So instead of trying to catch them with internal combustion engine technology, we're going to develop electric vehicle technology. And they did. And they have learned they've scaled it. They're doing amazing R&D. They now, have a battery industry and they've scaled that on and on and on. You know the story. I've talked about it a million times. They were proactive. They had a strategy, then they had a plan to implement the strategy, they had policies to implement the plans, and they did a very good job of executing it. We do not have that. Essentially, what we're doing is Prime Minister Mark Carney is responding to Trump and saying, we're going to do internal free trade and we're going to find new trading partners. We're not going to fundamentally change the way we do things. We're going to dig up some different minerals. We're going to send them, are we going to send them over raw as we normally do? Like our oil and gas, we send unfinished, unprocessed down to the United States. Our round logs we send from BC over to China, unprocessed, on and on. we sell raw natural resources to other markets. That's what we do. And that's not a very good strategy going into this new long cycle dominated by electric technologies and so many other innovations. And we're basically stuck in the past, I guess is my point. And we have not developed. The Prime Minister keeps promising us industrial policy. We have not had it. And you can look up go to our channel and do a search for industrial policy. I've had lots of interviews about it. So think of this video as the first of a two-parter, because the next video that I'm doing today is going to be about Mark Carney and his Minister of Natural Resources, Tim Hodgson. They both came out of Goldman Sachs Canada. And that, I'm going to argue, is a very influential, it's influenced Carney in how he sees Canada and the strategy that we're going to undertake, and why he brought Hodgson in and not somebody else. So keep an eye out for that video. And if you don't agree with the way I frame things here with the Annales School, a three-part model, comment on it. Be nice. But if you disagree, if you've got a substantive argument against it, why you think I'm wrong, or even if you think I'm right, put something in the comments, and I'll try to respond to it later on during this week, and maybe we'll get a little conversation going.